It had been a month since the incident in the street, and John Watson had been trying to move on from the loss of his friend and colleague Sherlock Holmes. He tried to keep himself busy with work and other activities, but there were moments when he couldn't help but think of the brilliant detective and his tragic end. One afternoon, as Watson was walking down the street lost in thought, he saw someone who looked remarkably like Sherlock. The man was staring directly at Watson, and then suddenly turned and ran away. Watson was taken aback by the resemblance and couldn't believe what he had just seen. He decided not to think too much about it and continued on his way. However, the image of the man's face stayed with him, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. He couldn't help but wonder if it was possible that Sherlock had somehow survived. Later that day, Watson had a meeting scheduled with Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's older brother. They had agreed to meet at a local pub and discuss the details of Sherlock's funeral arrangements. As Watson sat down with Mycroft, he couldn't help but bring up the strange encounter he had earlier that day. "I know it sounds ridiculous," Watson said, "but I saw someone who looked exactly like Sherlock today." Mycroft looked at him skeptically. "John, you know that's not possible. Sherlock is gone, and we have to accept that." "I know," Watson said with a sigh. "I just can't help but think that maybe there's something we missed, some clue or evidence that would suggest otherwise." Mycroft nodded sympathetically. "I understand how you feel, John, but we have to focus on the funeral arrangements and honoring Sherlock's memory." As they continued their discussion, Mycroft suddenly burst into loud, uncontrollable laughter. Watson was taken aback by this sudden outburst and couldn't understand what was so amusing. "Mycroft, what's so funny?" Watson asked, bewildered. Mycroft tried to compose himself but couldn't stop laughing. "I'm sorry, John," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "It's just that I can't believe I never thought of this before." "Thought of what?" Watson asked, still confused. Mycroft leaned in conspiratorially. "The project," he whispered. "What project?" Watson asked, his curiosity piqued. Mycroft hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Sherlock was involved in a highly classified government project. It was so secretive that even I didn't know the full details." Watson's eyes widened in surprise. "What kind of project?" Mycroft leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. "I'm not entirely sure," he said slowly. "All I know is that it involved national security and required a level of expertise that only someone like Sherlock could provide." Watson sat there in stunned silence, trying to process this new information. If what Mycroft was saying was true, then it was possible that Sherlock had faked his own death as part of this project. But why would he do something so drastic? "Mycroft, do you think it's possible that Sherlock is still alive?" Watson asked tentatively. Mycroft shrugged. "I can't say for certain, John, but given his involvement in the project and his history of deception, it's not outside the realm of possibility." Watson's mind was racing with possibilities. If Sherlock was still alive, then he had to find him and get some answers, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. "Mycroft, will you help me find him?" Mycroft's face turned serious. "Watson, I must advise you not to pursue this any further. Your friend, Sherlock, is dead. The evidence is conclusive. It's best that you move on and find some closure." Watson was taken aback by Mycroft's response. He had never seen him so dismissive. "Mycroft, you know as well as I do that Sherlock was always one step ahead. He was a master of deception. I refuse to believe that he's dead without concrete proof." Mycroft let out a deep sigh. "Very well, Watson. But if you insist on investigating, you should know that it's a dangerous path. You could be putting yourself in harm's way." Watson was undeterred. He knew he had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. "I understand the risks, Mycroft, but I owe it to Sherlock to uncover the truth. Will you help me?" Mycroft looked at Watson intently. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I'll see what I can do, Watson. But I must warn you, this won't be easy. Sherlock was always one step ahead, and if he is still alive, he will have gone to great lengths to cover his tracks." Watson felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Mycroft. I appreciate your help." As Watson left Mycroft's office, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. He had a sense that someone was following him. He turned around but saw no one. He continued walking down the street until he reached his flat. He was about to enter when he heard a voice behind him. "Watson!" He turned around and saw a shadowy figure in the alleyway. It was the same person he had seen a month ago, the one who resembled Sherlock. Watson's heart skipped a beat. "Sherlock, is that you?" The figure stepped forward and Watson could see his face more clearly. It was indeed Sherlock. Watson was overjoyed. "Sherlock, you're alive! Why did you fake your death? What's going on?" Sherlock put his finger to his lips. "Not here, Watson. We need to talk somewhere safe. Meet me at the old abandoned warehouse by the docks at midnight." Watson nodded, and the figure disappeared into the shadows. As Watson walked back to his flat, his mind was racing. He couldn't believe that Sherlock was alive. He wondered what kind of secret project he was involved in that required him to fake his death. He arrived at his flat and decided to spend the rest of the day preparing for his meeting with Sherlock. He gathered all the evidence he had collected and went over it one more time. At midnight, Watson arrived at the abandoned warehouse. He saw Sherlock standing in the shadows waiting for him. Sherlock stepped forward and Watson could see the exhaustion on his face. "Watson, I'm sorry I had to put you through all this. I needed to disappear to work on a top-secret project. I couldn't even tell Mycroft or it would have compromised the entire operation." Watson was still in shock. "What kind of project, Sherlock?" Sherlock paused for a moment, staring into the distance as if calculating something. I'll tell you, Watson, the full story. Even if I don't have the permission, I will tell you that. But first, we have to wait for something." Watson looked at him quizzically. "Wait for what?"